First and foremost, the whole issue of equality between women and men, much as there's been a commitment at the level of the African Union, we don't always see that trickling down in practical implementation at the level of our regional member countries. I think that's the first thing. But we're in a good space. 2015 is the year in which the Sustainable Development Goals have been adopted. And goal number 5 is very clearly a goal that focuses on gender equality, and we see this across all other goals, I would argue. Some may narrow it down to specifics, but as Amina Mohammed, now the Minister of Environment in Nigeria, said, it's almost a gate through which to enter the other goals, because we're all committed to achieving the optimal growth on the African continent, and you can't do that with half of the human capital of the continent. We've clearly identified the need to review the regulatory and policy environments as it relates to women's access to finance, and AWES, that is jointly organized by the African Development Bank and New Faces, New Voices. It's the New Faces, New Voices brand. It has focused on this. So we need to look at ensuring the policy change. A third area is also the absence of collateral. And here, women, when they try to access credit at banks, have to indicate what their assets are. And we know that inheritance laws, property rights in countries across the continent is quite checkered as it comes to women's ownership of property and land. So it's an issue that we need to do more work on. We need to look at some of the examples in North Africa where they're looking at property from a different perspective and seeing a window of leasing as a possible area, but also looking at collateral differently. I mean, can we look at movable assets? If you go to the Eastern Cape, one asset in the Eastern Cape that's not counted, and this is for men and women, is cattle. So why can't we look at cattle and see how that can be used? So I think work to be done on that area. So we need the private sector to come to the party together with the public sector, with the regulators, and change the scenario around. And mind you, we shouldn't say that it's about risk and that women are risk, represent risk. The president of the bank, President Adesina, made an announcement during the Feed Africa Summit in Dakar, where he stated very boldly that there's a need for a facility that women are able to access funding from, whether it's women at the bottom of the pyramid or the missing middle. And this particular facility is an affirmative action, an affirmative finance action for African women facility. And the facility, the announcement was a 300 million facility with a prospect of leveraging $3 billion. You may recall that in 2013, the board passed a $150 million SME facility, and we've managed to ring fence 50 million for women or majority-owned women SMEs. And I think this is really a sign. There's a lot else we can talk about on what's been done, but at least we've made good on some of the areas that we made a commitment on. And coming back to the issue of the regulatory environment, this affirmative action fund for women is clearly going to look at bringing the regulators together with finance ministers and the private sector into the room and saying, how do we change the financial services landscape? Well, let me start with pledges. Firstly, pledges are important. It keeps you honest. You need to be accountable for commitments you've made. And I see this as always something to look towards. But secondly, the importance of the African Women's Economic Summit is to bring players around the table who would normally not be there. It also crowds in women, the new faces, and new voices that are not the normal ones, the usual ones around the table. And what's more is that there's been a move to even take it to a next level and to mobilize a huge movement around that. And I think this is what Africa needs. At the end of the day, individuals contribute towards change, but change comes about when you have a movement for change that brings creative partnerships together.